Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matt Hein. This is the Vertex webinar on Connected Enterprise, Build, Connect, and Extend Your Digital Thread. As I just said, my name is Matt Hein. I'm VP of Product, and I am joined by my colleague, John Heller, who's in Product Marketing. A little bit on my background. I've got 20 plus years experience building software applications in 3D data visualization, data science, machine learning, and spent a long time leading user experience and also just cloud computing architectures. Previously, I've done work at Workiva, where I spent 10 years working on digital transformation technologies and cloud software for financial services. And before that, I was doing graduate research at Iowa State University on data visualization and data analysis. And like I said, I'm joined by my colleague, John Heller, and I'll let John introduce himself.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So prior to joining Vertex, I spent approximately 18 years across a couple different manufacturing companies, as you see there. First being at Dassault Falcon Jet, and then most recently, before joining Vertex, at Danfoss Power Solutions. And both of those companies afforded me the opportunity to hold a couple different roles across product development, across manufacturing, liaising between engineering and the manufacturing floor with design and data, and then as well as doing a stint, I would say, in the supply chain world and helping optimize supply chain through the manufacturing process and suppliers, as well as different product roadmaps and leading products to market. So happy to be here. Back to you, Matt.
Thanks, John. So I wanted to kick off kind of the webinar. And by the way, this is one webinar in a series that we're doing on just connected digital thread. Our first webinar was a couple of weeks ago on manufacturing, but today we're going to spend a lot of our time talking about kind of a higher level view of the digital thread across the enterprise. From our perspective on the digital thread, it's all of those connected people, processes, and data across all of the departments throughout the enterprise, both inside the organization and also outside the organization. So that could mean suppliers, but it can also mean customers or maybe OEMs that you work with. And so from our perspective with the digital thread, trying to connect all of these different groups across the top, from engineering and then everything downstream of engineering, manufacturing, service, sales, and like I said, your users of your product. But then also the enterprise systems across the bottom, PLM, obviously with connected to MES and ERP systems, but as well as maybe CRM and IoT. And the goal is that going through the digital thread, building a digital thread, connecting that digital thread would unlock certain benefits to your organization. And I'll just touch on a few of these in each one. So within sales, maybe being able to actually have your Salesforce or maybe your CPQ type applications, be able to actually have that connected to your product data, maybe that information from sales and your CRM being able to flow to engineering to have better engineer to order type experiences for those users. And along with that, it's also that customer experience around seeing your configured product or the product that you've co-designed with your customer, being able to present that to them and collaborate on that design. Within manufacturing, we spent a long time kind of digging through some use cases on this 2 weeks ago, but being able to get that connected digital thread back down to your shop floor, and being able to provide, let's say, 3D work instructions, improve quality, model-based definitions on the shop floor, but also connecting your factory to the rest of your organization to look at OEE and things like that. The other, and we'll definitely do more of this in a future webinar, but talking through aftermarket and being able to identify parts, get work instructions to the field service, reduce downtime, get repairs done faster. Also, being able to shorten design cycles by having better collaboration amongst your design engineering teams and your supply chain. And then we'll touch on this quite a bit, being able to build digital twins connected to live enterprise data sources. And we'll definitely step through some demos at the end of the webinar here. That's kind of the vision, but oftentimes when Vertex gets involved in an engagement, and we kind of look at the as is for the state of the digital thread, across organizations, both large and small, it really is kind of a tangled web, disconnected systems, both, and I'd say it's not only a technical challenge. I actually think the technical challenges are easier to overcome. I think sometimes the cultural challenges between departments, between product lines, maybe between company locations, and just the way that a large organization builds and evolves. I often think that some of these cultural silos really impact the digital thread, because everyone, from my perspective, that digital thread needs to be that cohesive, connected chain where you can query across all these systems, and everyone has that democratization of that data. And that's kind of touching on the next one. It's real lack of true enterprise PLM. However, PLM is just one of those systems, and I would say likewise, engineering might not necessarily have access to some of the other enterprise systems and other departments. And really, that's the kind of the cross-team collaboration and knowledge and information sharing that you would really want to have in order to make better decisions there. One digital thread reality that we often find is just that system might be accessible to some of the users there, but think about for the design engineers on the phone, like the that PLM or those CAD viewers, how easy to use are those systems, and do you actually need that system of record to be the user interface to that group? Sometimes these things are just too complex and require training and certification even on how to use them, and so that often creates some of these barriers. And like I said, there's cultural challenges, but then there really are some just technical limitations with some of these systems of record. And we just often find that maybe the data is not in the right format, maybe the data is not clean. I've actually got a blog post coming up on data quality and how to clean data and things like that. But if you don't have some of those, let's say your data systems that have overlapping keys that can be used to connect these systems together, like this will become a real challenge, and we'll touch on that here with one of our examples. And like I've already said, the user experience is just often too complex for some of these untrained users. And I'll turn it over to John to talk about some of the core problems that we see in detail.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So, I think what we hear time and time again from customers that we talk to and other manufacturing professionals right now is that this reality that Matt just stepped through is being caused by these exchange difficulties and getting the data moved throughout the enterprise. And I've heard it mentioned several times in thought leadership forums and different discussions across the manufacturing industry that this data now is becoming too viscous. It's too thick, it's too sludgy, it's too heavy. It takes a large effort to be able to move it throughout your enterprise and then to be able to connect your enterprise, and so that actionable insights can be realized and taken. So we see that these downstream teams remain disconnected in most cases and unreachable with this data. And it's because this data is coming from all these different sources, not only from engineering, but across your extended enterprise. Then we see that once this data, if it is able to reach your downstream users, that as Matt mentioned, your UI is extremely complex. There's no interactivity, and it becomes extremely difficult, if not impossible, to feed that data back through the organization, perhaps back upstream to those individuals that can make the decisions and make the changes needed. This challenge is brought on mostly due to the fact that there are requirements for special hardware, special software, and the extremely large data sets. So moving on to specifically how Vertex addresses this, Vertex enables your product data to be able to be communicated free of barriers across your extended enterprise. So now, instead of just having a one-way street with multiple roadblocks or bumps and getting that data downstream, Vertex now frees the constraints of the UI complexity as well as the data barriers and provides a seamless way to be able to build, connect, and interact with digital twin applications all along the digital thread. We're able to do this and able to deliver this data without any real data transformation needed, simplifying the process and the time commitment involved. And we like to think of it as now you have the versatile building blocks to be able to provide interactive digital twin applications from multiple use cases, as you see illustrated here. The next, moving on, we see that not only are we able to provide the building blocks for multiple use cases, but these multiple use cases truly can now span the entire digital thread. Starting from your as-ordered configuration, as Matt mentioned a couple slides earlier, being able to interact with the customer, connect them to the data that they need to be able to make the right decision up front. Then moving that through engineering into the as-designed state, connecting the right teams throughout that design process so that the customer truly gets what's expected. Then moving that through then to the as-built, in your manufacturing through your MBOMs, connecting to the supply chain, getting the right parts in, monitoring the quality. Then the data that we see comes from all of the assembly and the manufacturing processes through IoT data. And then finally, through the as-serviced or your service BOMs, and being able to find exactly what's needed, be able to service a part that perhaps needs to be replaced in the field accurately and quickly and in a timely fashion. So we'll take a look at some few examples here across the digital thread with a few demos here. First one we'd like to focus in on is really this idea, this challenge that we see in connecting the enterprise comes first from this term big data. We've all heard the term big data. I mentioned it earlier, how viscous this data is, how difficult it is to move, to connect. And obviously, as we see the world and manufacturing in particular moving farther along its digital transformation journey, there continues to be this proliferation of sensor data. The sensor data is not confined to just one product or one, perhaps single assembly line, but it's across the entire manufacturing floor now. It's across multiple sites. It's across multiple in-use applications out in the field. And the challenge becomes, okay, how do we connect this data? How do we pull this data back together? Next challenge we see then becomes, okay, once I have this data, how do I contextualize this in order to gain actionable insights from this data? I think of the example of telematics. Telematics, I think, has come a long way. It still continues to be this buzzword where telematics pulls all of the sensor data from the field, and then you get this data in, let's say, in a tabular format or in a spreadsheet. And okay, now what? Now we've got all this data. What do we do with it? And then, how do you, once you've got that data, how do you effectively pass that data on to somebody who can do something with it or make the right decision? So we see barriers moving that data in and out of engineering. And I think Matt will now show an example of how Vertex is solving this.
Yeah, thanks, John. So I'm going to jump out of the presentation here, and I'm going to go to our developer portal for the Vertex platform. And by the way, all of these examples that I'm going to demo today, you can try them out yourself. If you click on the examples tab on the developer portal, we've got several examples here. And I'm going to start with this 3D visual analytics application, and I'm going to click Launch App. And by the way, before I click Launch App, one thing to note, all of these examples that we'll be going through today are actually open sourced and available on GitHub. So I'm going to click Launch App. And this is an example application that we built to kind of show off the power of the Vertex platform as being a, user interface to that connected digital thread. As John was saying, with some of these, issues around big data, you've got, let's say, systems like Tableau and other kind of enterprise analytics type reporting applications. The interesting thing that you can do with those is create really interesting reports, but a lot of the time, most of the time, you're just looking at either tabular reports or pie charts, graphs, things like that. And one thing that we've run across a number of groups at enterprise customers that are saying, okay, we've got all this interesting data sources outside of our PLM system. Can I connect my CAD PLM data with those data sources and be able to run kind of interactive reports to help me visualize, contextualize a lot of this information? A quick example here, and by the way, one of the things that we did with this example was, well, we knew that a lot of these customers were creating these reports that could be output to just like a Excel file or a CSV file. So what we said was, well, what if you could take your data and say, let's run an analysis on just part costs, for example, and now what if I could drag and drop just that CSV file onto this 3D window and help me visualize all of my cost data right in context? So with this, now you can really start to, let's say, once this is actually connected to your reporting system, all of your queries and analysis you could actually have connected back into that CAD PLM data and make really interesting, complex queries to help you, better understand reporting at different product milestones. Let's say, for example, one type of report that I thought was interesting, chatting with a user. They wanted to understand like the data quality. It wasn't just the data; they were interested in the data quality, being able to report on it. And one of the things that they said was, well, we have this paint specification field, and every single part needs a paint specification, even if the paint specification is don't paint. And yet, very few of our parts actually, let's just say not everyone has filled in their required field of like the paint specification. So can you run a report and show me all of the parts that don't have a paint specification on this machine on this product at this stage in development? Because that's what we need to do to ensure data quality checks. Another example, just cost rollups, weight, mass rollups. But then there's some other interesting things, and we'll show this in a second. Tapping into your defect and warranty database, and really being able to pull in historical data for different systems. And one example of that we've run into for this is just trying to understand part reuse. If I'm let's say for this particular vehicle, I want to roll this vehicle forward to the next kind of vehicle architecture, what systems should I say that are still valid that we should reuse? Which ones were problematic in the past? Can you guys be like that Google Maps, Google Earth view of all of my data, all my systems, cross that digital thread and pull that together so that we can better understand what we're dealing with, and kind of be that visual user interface for my digital thread. So that's just one example. Missing color, this missing colors, again, this is related to kind of that paint specification. By the way, you could also, interestingly, use this same technique to actually do, product configurations very quickly. All that we're doing, and this ties back to that digital thread concept, is we've got unique part numbers, assembly numbers, serial numbers for your digital thread in your PLM system. Hopefully you also have that is unique across your other systems. And then what you can do with Vertex is tie those things together. And we're not actually consuming or replicating any of the data. We're simply querying it and presenting it to you. And another example is just different suppliers that by part, for example. So all of this data, if it exists either attached to your PLM data directly through the metadata fields, or it's an external data source, we can pull all that data together and quickly and easily visualize it.
Thank you. The next problem we see when organizations try to connect their enterprise now expands a little bit beyond this concept of the big data into specifically IoT. And again, when you have multiple product lines running in a facility across multiple facilities, many different moving parts within your manufacturing organization, not only in the supply chain, but also in your product assembly lines, your testing facilities, and then stepping outside to actually in-use products, being able then to connect all of those different sources of IoT data and being able to contextualize them to understand what that data means. We obviously, we want to be able to delight the customer. And many manufacturing organizations struggle to get that information back from the field to understand how things are performing in the field so that they can continue to keep their customers running, be able to service a part, implement predictive maintenance even before a customer might go down in the field. And so being able then to pull that data in quickly, contextualize it, and make the right decisions in a timely manner become extremely challenging in a connected enterprise scenario. So Matt will again will let you show some examples of how customers can solve that.
Yeah, thanks, John. I'm going to go back to the examples page here and then click this digital twin application. So, the example that I was showing before, I would say was mostly, let's say, a type of relational data coming off of, related to, let's say, those unique identifiers, part number, serial number, order number, things like that. However, the interesting thing about IoT data, and it's not just IoT data, it could also be simulation data that's more time series based. And so, the interesting thing about the time series is there's one more layer of indirection with your data model, and that it's not just related to part numbers, but now I have to associate, let's say, a sensor value that has a specific asset ID. So I want to tie that asset ID to that serial number, and then that sensor to a set of parts. And by the way, one thing to note on some of these digital twin examples, sometimes let's say things like airspeed, for example, maybe while my airspeed might be tracked by a sensor at the back of the wind turbine here, in reality, like to help me visualize and contextualize that data, maybe it's better to maybe apply airspeed to the turbine blades in this example. So there's a number of things that you can do with the Vertex platform where you create that mapping of asset ID, sensor ID to various parts of your product data. But by the way, it's not just product data. We have some customers that are actually using their full-scale factories and different parts of their factory to help them contextualize the sensor data that might, maybe there's a problematic area in your production line that has been giving you issues and creating bottlenecks, and creating additional sensors and wiring it up and being able to help the plant manager visualize and understand what's happening within that particular area of the factory has been something that we've been involved in. And so with these sensor data values, I can contextualize those over the top and then kind of step through. The other interesting thing is with this example actually showing live data feeds. And by the way, we use we're AWS partners, and so we have reference architectures for the AWS IoT pipeline, and pretty good integrations with AWS Sitewise, for example. Along with sort of that real-time data, you can also connect this back to that data warehouse. So that's another kind of interesting thing with this. And for our last example, John?
Yeah, lastly here, so these previous two examples, we spent some time focusing on the challenges of building and connecting digital twins for consumption, and we've shown very specific ways that data can be consumed by downstream users. So I alluded to it earlier, the problem is truly this one-way street. So I think customers and manufacturing professionals struggle to find a way to connect digital twins for consumption. And then there's also this challenge now and this focus being put on, okay, how can my extended enterprise now interact and contribute back to the digital thread, including supply chain, manufacturing, service, customers, et cetera. And so Matt will show you some examples of how we're providing now this interactivity back into the digital thread.
One more quick example, and we did go into this in depth at the last at our last webinar on connected manufacturing. So I'll kind of go over this quickly, but this is kind of a work instructions type example where I can provide step-by-step instructions. But the interesting thing about, I think this with that larger connected enterprise digital thread is, now I can also provide collaboration bidirectionally back to, back to different systems. So for example, like let's say I've got this this bolt here. I can click report issue here, and this is just an example of a system that that we built. And when I click that part or any of these other parts, we can grab that part identifier from that part. That could be the part name, part number, really anything that's attached to that metadata, and we could use that to populate some of these form fields back to submit back into the ERP system or the issue management system. And in this particular example, if you're reporting quality and defects as you're building a product, or maybe in things that you're noticing in the MRO or field service, you can actually use this as a way to identify parts and then actually submit data back into your system connected to that part. That way, that entire structure of that digital thread, the data integrity is there as you progress through that product lifecycle. So with that, I know we're running out of time, so I'll try to do a speed run through the rest of this. So we've kind of highlighted some of the examples of the Vertex platform for digital thread. Really the Vertex platform has been designed to be able to connect product data downstream of engineering, but we also have a lot of examples of digital thread applications within engineering. What makes us truly unique is our ability to take entire product data sets, not just parts or subsystems, but the whole product and deliver that downstream to any device on low-powered mobile devices, any numbers of users around the world, and we support high fidelity models with all of the data that you would want from the PLM or ERP system, plus the added benefit of being highly secure. Kind of our trick here is that we're not actually sharing any of the product data or streaming any of that data outside of the system. It's simply just rendering all the data server side and streaming pixels back to the different devices and applications. If you would like to learn more about the Vertex platform or any of the concepts, and by the way, at the last webinar, I got a few questions over email with some lively exchanges. So I'm always happy to kind of talk through use cases and data models and architectures and things like that. So feel free to reach out to me or John. So with that, thank you for your time.
Thank you.